Thank you everybody for participating and welcome to this session on comment writing in regards to STC competitions training. These slides exist in order to help you review your entries more efficiently, provide positive feedback to each entrant, and help determine award levels. Examples for each of these pieces will be provided. My name is Bernard Ashwanden and I'm going to be your presenter and host. There's many different reasons people submit content to STC. Of course, they want to earn that recognition from peers or their managers and clients, but they also want information on how to improve a portfolio that they might have. In many cases, they've also made decisions in regards to some of the things that they're changing in documentation, and they want to validate those decisions and get feedback. There may also be specific problems or issues that exist, and they're looking for advice in regards to the best way to take existing documentation and improve it for moving ahead. And that, of course, leads to overall ideas for innovation and improvement to everything and all aspects of the material that they create. As a competition judge, it's important to understand exactly what is it that people want from the ISA. The awards are nice, but bear in mind that every single entry at the ISA level has already won an award at a community level. So you need to add value. Another ribbon is going to be nice to have, but it's not the crucial component. Instead, make sure that you provide excellent feedback on exactly how somebody can improve content by explaining where an issue exists, why this is actually an issue, and how the issue can be addressed and improvements made to the overall content. Let's begin by exploring where specific issues exist. We need to make sure that the entrants know exactly what type of information they have that needs work, and that means you need to identify where the information can be found. Make sure you provide that context. To simply say the image is blurry without identifying which image makes it very difficult for someone to resolve. Of course, if all images are blurry, then you may want to make a specific point of identifying that every single image in the documentation is blurry, but in many cases it's a single image. Better examples would be to reference the image. For example, figure 7-1 is blurry, allows them to leaf through and find that image. If it's a printed copy and there's more than one image, identify which one you're discussing. So the figure on page 17 is blurry is fine if it's the only instance, or the second figure on page 17 if there's multiple. If it's an online entry, you can also right mouse click on a lot of images inside browsers, call up some of the image properties, and get the name of the image so that you can identify the exact location and the image that's at issue. Once the specifics of where the image is, why begins to become an important factor. We need to explain to an entrant why this specific type of a problem is a concern. So to simply identify that there is an image and to give a great location for it as a start, but then to say blurry images look bad doesn't provide more detail. Instead, there's a couple of examples, such as the workflow image is difficult to see and may result in missed steps. So it's identifying that the image is weak and that this could have a negative impact. By people missing steps, they may end up messing up a procedure, and in turn, they may end up making calls to support desk, and this becomes a cost for an organization. Another good example would be a blurry code sample could result in an error when people transcribe the sample. Something as simple as a semicolon or a colon that doesn't show up very clearly could result in code compiling incorrectly. Another good example would be to tell someone that a map to their office should make it easy to find them. This identifies the benefit of having that clear map, and again, all of these pieces come together to explain why it matters that this problem be addressed. Once we have clearly identified where the image can be found and why the current appearance of the image is an issue, make sure that we also include clear information on exactly how to improve this. To simply tell somebody to fix the images is sort of a logical extension of there's a problem, but it doesn't provide them guidance on how. Instead, providing information such as a vector image of the workflow is much easier to scale and keep crisp, or instead of an image showing a code sample, you could add type text, or even consider a live link to a map, provides information on how to resolve the problem. Combining these three ideas together, I end up with a very bad example or a pretty good example. Don't mix together pieces from the bad and the good example and think that you end up with a good one. Each of the individual pieces in the bad example is bad, even if used in part as a component of a good example. So as an example, in the bad content I have the image is blurry. If my good example still says the image is blurry and it's followed by the workflow image is difficult to see and may result in missed steps, followed by a vector image of the workflow is much easier to scale and keep crisp, I'm still not providing a location of where the information can be found in regards to the blurry image. So bad example of the image is blurry and blurry images look bad, so fix them. Good example, and we'll see more of these as we move on. As a judge, it's important to understand how to phrase any input or suggestions that you're going to make. Be positive in the messaging. Offer constructive criticism to help somebody improve their documentation. Use the active voice in all of the writing that you're doing, and make sure you take advantage of a spell check and a grammar check to make sure your content is at a professional level. If you're going to be providing feedback to somebody suggesting that they improve their materials, let's make sure that our source, the comments that the judges create, are as close to perfect as they can be. I mentioned that I would show you a couple of other good comment samples. So here's two more based on some of the principles from the last slide. The first is that the figure on page 17 is blurry, and this code sample may result in error when people transcribe it. Instead of an image showing a code sample, you could add typed text. Another good sample would be, your map at this location should make it easy to find your office, but it is blurry. Map to your office should make it easy to find you. Consider a live link to an online map. Bonus, users can use their start location to find your offices. Both of these address the three core ideas of identifying where the issue is, why it's a problem, and how this can be resolved. What I'd like to do is explore a bad source example that might be inside documentation. Now, this is the first version of it, and there's a second one that'll show up later. This bad example has a paragraph in it that likely was written by a subject matter expert and reads, when working with a laser, you can adjust the lens to tighten the focal beam. This will increase intensity. Note that doing this can result in a beam that could damage equipment or cause fatal injury. Turn the lens clockwise to tighten the focal beam and counterclockwise to loosen the focal beam. There's a couple of really major issues in this that I'll explore in subsequent slides. As a judge, one of the things that I definitely do is point out where this instance happens. So I would type in some comment along the lines of the note on page 17 beginning with, note that doing this is difficult to see. Then I would identify why this is an issue. Property damage or loss of life needs to stand out. And lastly, I would offer a suggestion on how to improve the material. This is part of a process, and it may be best to first inform people of the possibility of harm and then move to steps. You can also reduce word count and clarify the message. See my suggestion for ideas. Then I would also add in something along the lines of what's here. Now this is my example. It has fewer words, provides a visual cue in regards to the hand with the stop sign background, and a very clear to understand note. It also, hopefully, really shows the value of professional technical communication to an organization that submitted materials. My example, therefore, adds in this content. The laser lens adjusts to tighten the focal beam and increase intensity. Note, this can result in a beam that could damage equipment or cause fatal injury. 1. Turn the lens clockwise. What I've done here is made sure that I've kept the original information and message that's being delivered, but I've also reworked it, and I would likely add in additional commentary explaining that here I still have a brief introduction, I have a very clearly visible, identifiable note, and then I've broken the information into steps, step 1 and 2 and 3, making it clear for someone exactly how to do the procedure. This is a better example. It still has the same content, generally speaking, but it's been cleaned up a little bit. It reads, the laser lens adjusts to tighten the focal beam and increase intensity. Standalone, clear paragraph. It has procedural, step 1 and 2. Turn the lens clockwise, turn the lens counterclockwise, and then yes, it does have note that doing this can result in a beam that could damage equipment or cause fatal injury. It's in bold, it has the word note at the beginning of it. This is better. Not great, but it's better. Fortunately, as a judge, I'm going to choose to say the exact same thing that I used earlier. So this slide's a nice quick one. And again, we've already explored this, but I will add one more comment here. In my documentation back to the submitter, I may also add in some information that says something along the lines of identifying the note far more clearly, explaining that this could cause fatal injury, also increases the likelihood that somebody will avoid a problem and therefore reduce the likelihood of legal costs. If somebody was to use the documentation as it existed and the content either didn't stand out at all or was inconsistent in how it stands out, we open ourselves up to legal liability. This information that you see on screen right now dramatically can reduce that type of an impact. That's a huge issue that companies need to be dealing with. Content has to be clearly delivered. It has to be in the right format so that people can read it, understand all of the risks, and then decide how to move ahead. If that's done, it will save money. There's more examples to follow, but a couple of tips when you're writing up any of the comments used in an assessment. Remain fair, impartial, and provide constructive assessments. We want to work our way through and evaluate exactly how well any of the work that is submitted does what it is intended to do. Bear in mind that each submitter has information about restrictions they may be working under, who their audience is, what their goals are. Review that carefully along the way as you're doing your assessment. Refer back to it often. Make sure that your assessment contains detailed and specific comments based on some of the samples that are shown here and things that you learn from other judges, judging leads, team leads, people who you work with, anybody who is involved in that documentation lifecycle. Use clear examples from their material to make points about anything that they have entered. And of course, make sure that you remain diplomatic and professional. We represent our profession in regards to this work that's being done. All of your comments should be detailed and specific. Make sure you take the time to be positive about things that work well. Even the weakest entry could be entered by somebody who is trying to get feedback on how to improve it. So yes, there's going to be many areas where you provide information on how to fix up the content, and you can end with a positive message that says something along the lines of, while the content that is submitted currently has many weaknesses, implementing some of the changes that are suggested should help you meet your goal of dramatically reducing support calls and improving the quality of your material. You should be applauded for taking this step. That way people feel good about it. In this case, the artwork is being reviewed. There's a comment that graphics are often spectacular, and in this entry they are very smartly not used simply for decoration. They provide essential visual support for all of the text, and they sometimes contain essential information. Graphics are prepared with great vision and skill, and they convey that complex information to the reader in a way that makes it easier to understand and to comprehend a difficult idea. Continuing with the idea of using examples, don't sugarcoat it when there are issues. Be specific. For example, in regards to the interface design, there may be some good and very key negatives. In general, navigation from page to page was easy. Great, that's a positive message. Linking in both directions was simple to understand, as it used standard conventions of forward-back buttons. The page Startup Essentials only appeared at first launch and was impossible to locate again. It contains important information and should be indexed or in the table of contents. To make viewing on mobile devices, which you state as your goal, easier, break chapters into smaller linked topics to reduce scrolling, etc., etc., etc. Tying back any of the issues and being able to resolve them to the stated goal that is inside the entrant submission makes a direct link so that they can see the value of what's being entered and the feedback that they receive. Along the way, make sure that you use that where, why, and how combination. Clear examples and then solutions based on the submitter's info are fantastic. In this case, there's several examples, one on page 10, one on page 11, one on page 72. Then there's two closing statements. One says, those are 3 specific examples. There are many major issues in each chapter. It is difficult to read and understand and is a disservice to your product. What I've done with that statement is gone through and identified that this has major issues and likely will support my recommendation that no award be given. I also go in and then provide a solution. Having the engineers provide content to a writer is great, but ensure the writer is allowed to clarify the content, copy edit material, and clarify the message. Now, that's a good start, but it doesn't involve a business reason for allowing the writer to do that. Let's move to the next slide. Remember that entrants generally pay pretty good money in order to enter into a competition, and in this case, we want to give specific business reasons for them to make changes. So the assessment area is grammar and syntax with a couple of bullets in regards to what we're looking for, and then there is this. Incorrect phrases like quite simply, irregardless, and truly unique are often used throughout the document. So in this case, I'm not identifying exactly where because it is a common issue. If your content was reviewed for a final copy edit to reduce complex phrases, clarify the message, and simplify word use, you will see a clear reduction in word count, an improved clarity of the message, and a reduction in all of your translation costs. This is good. It's explaining why. And then there's a really neat little piece down at the end that says, on your entry form. So now I'm tying it back to the actual entrance material and to the entrance reason for submitting the material. You state a goal of completing your first ever translation to 12 languages next year. A full copy edit ensures lower translation costs, better messaging, and faster time to market. And those are all key statements that become business reasons. It will cost you less, you will have a better image, and you will get there before the competition. This again shows business value in technical communications. As we wind down the slides, I want to remind you to be diplomatic and professional in what you do. No one wants to be preached to, but providing guidance is great. So avoid giving a command such as use white space on page 47 because it looks terrible right now. And it may look terrible, and they should use white space, but think about the way that it's phrased. A better example might be to instruct somebody that they should consider adding white space on page 47 to help the reader navigate through this complex mathematical discussion and introduce visual and logical pause points. That provides far more feedback on why somebody should be making this type of a change. Also, focus on resolving the problems, not on the actual specific problem. So if the problem is that it lacks accessibility features that are really needed online, great, that's important, but on its own, it doesn't explain how to resolve it. If you then follow it up by having something like, by adding an index to the homepage of your website, users can search for and find particular information about your organization quickly, and it adds accessibility features. It also gives you a back-end way to identify what it is that people want to find. This type of a message really provides a much stronger and positive image of what needs to be done. Many of the examples to this point have either dealt with pretty specific focused information such as the note, or a couple of things in regards to aspects of the documentation, such as some of the grammar issues. You should also give clear and detailed reasoning into the overall document summary and your final feedback. To simply say define content and include samples and summaries doesn't give as much value as a statement such as fleshing the content out with specific examples and clear summary statements, defining confusing non-audience specific acronyms and terminology, and adding more summary information about department activities would give substance to a well-organized and visually appealing annual review. What we've done at this point is put together a summary statement that draws together all of the observations that have been made in specific parts of your assessment down to a single statement that identifies very big picture, some of the things that still need to be done in order to move this document from, as an example, an excellent to a distinguished. Note also that I have at no point mentioned in writing that this is an excellent or a distinguished. I'm simply providing information that shows how to improve the overall quality. When the entrant receives the award of excellent this year and resubmits a new annual report that's updated next year with these changes, the hope is that the document itself has improved in such a way that it moves to a distinguished and that they really start to see the benefit of entering the material 1 year to the next. In conclusion, I just want to restate that you should be professional in what you write. Remember that you represent our profession and the value that we provide to organizations. Imagine yourself asked by a potential employer to review this content and provide feedback on what works, what doesn't, and constructive criticism on how we can improve. Think of the where is that specific issue found, the why is this an issue that they need to be aware of, and what can be done to address the issues. And then write in the same way that you would converse with somebody who has asked you to review their content, provide feedback, and let them know how to improve it. Thank you very much for participating as a judge, as a team lead, as a competition manager, or in any other way with the STC competition, and I look forward to hearing any feedback that you may have about these materials.